Hello and welcome. My name is Ashley Johnson and I'm the Business and Outreach Librarian at the Vernon Area Library. Before we get started today, I wanted to mention that this program is brought to you in partnership with the Lake Cook Career Collaborative. This is a group of libraries in the Lake and Cook counties of Illinois who've banded together to promote and offer workforce development training for our communities. So we're aiming to help educate and train unemployed and underemployed residents. So feel free to visit the website at careercollab.org for more information about the program, as well as a list of all the upcoming programs. Additionally, we're recording this, so it will be posted to the Vernon Area Library YouTube page for the next 2 weeks. And I'll share that link in an email after it's published, so you can share it with your friends and your network, or feel free to rewatch again if you missed any information or you want to just double up. And with that, I'm happy to introduce today's speaker, Jez Layman. Jez is a librarian, public speaker, and job coach who loves teaching and empowering others to embrace their creativity and strengths. She is taught at libraries, schools, and community centers about crafts, astrology, so cool, and life skills, and her job hunting guides have been shared over 250,000 times worldwide. She has a deep love for audiobooks and a spreadsheet for every occasion. Thank you and welcome, Jez.
Thank you. Let me pull up my screen here.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm gonna duck away, and if you have any questions, again, folks, please use the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be sure to get to that.
Let's start. Okay, so we're going to talk about cover letters today. I teach a couple of different job hunting classes. They all work together, but you can take them individually. So I'm going to mention a couple of things that might not be cover letter specific, but will still help you in your job hunt. So the first thing is you want to gather your resources. We want to have everything on hand to be able to pull from to put together a cover letter. So your resume is going to be one of the most helpful things you have. You also want to have a copy of the job posting that you're applying for. And when you do see this posting online, I do recommend downloading it or even just taking a screenshot, because once you get to the interview stage, that posting is no longer going to be available, but you're going to still need it later. You're going to need that for your interview prep. So I do recommend downloading that, just saving it to your computer so you have it. There may be a separate job description. Sometimes these are a little bit different. The job posting is what you're going to find probably on like Indeed or Monster, and then you'll go to the company's website and you'll find a much longer job description if they have provided one. Job descriptions aren't always provided. I wish they were, but if you do have the opportunity to get both, I recommend downloading both. And then one thing I suggest making is a list of your achievements and some talking points. So what this means is we really just want to put together a list of things that you want to remember to talk about, because the more you work on this, the less it's going to look like real words, because you've looked at it so much. And we want to make sure that you don't forget anything important. This is actually very good to make first before you've made your resume. It's pretty helpful in doing that. If you've come to any of my other classes, you know that I talk a lot about having a job hunting kit. So this could be a physical folder. It could be something on your computer. It could just be a flash drive. Basically, what you want is a list of your achievements. If you have a list of your past work history, that can be really helpful, especially when filling out applications. You're going to have copies of your resume. You might have multiple versions of your resume, and that is okay and even encouraged if you're applying for different kinds of jobs. And then you'll have the job postings, job descriptions, and your cover letters. I recommend having all of this together so that at any point in the job hunting process, you can pull these things easily. When we are back to in-person things and you can go to a job fair, it's very helpful at that point as well. And you can even bring it into your interviews and have your talking points already available in front of you, I also suggest having paper and some kind of writing utensil in there so you can take notes. If you have it on your computer, you just keep a running Word doc or Google Doc, just Notepad, anything that you can take notes on, write things to yourself. I just suggest having all of these things together. It's going to make your life so much easier as you go through the job hunting process. Try it again. There we go. So what we want to do is take the job posting and job description, and we're going to go through and see what they need from you. What kind of things are they looking for in an employee? What are the requirements? What are the suggestions? Now, I physically highlight my job postings and job descriptions when I'm going through or when I'm helping someone apply for a job. You can do this on your computer, you can print it out, do it that way, you can just make notes, whatever works for you. The point is to get the wording from the job description, and we're going to start with circling any necessary skills or experience you do not have. So it might look something like this. This tends to be what mine look like. I do use all the different colors and I have to use them in rainbow order. But I highlight all of the major tasks and responsibilities that they are asking for. So for a front office position, this is how I got started in the workforce. I was a receptionist and a medical receptionist for quite a while. So some of these things included filing, organizing documents, greeting clients, answering the phone, spreadsheets, my love language, incoming and outgoing mail, and meeting minutes, office supplies, all of those things. So I'm highlighting those so that I can easily pick them out later, and we're going to mention them in our cover letter. Now, I've circled dictations. I do not have experience taking dictation, so I've circled that one because it might be something that I'm going to bring up later when they ask me, do you have all the qualifications? And I'm prepared to answer that and say, no, I don't have experience with this, but I'm very excited to learn. I have everything else. It's just a way to bring your focus to what you might need to talk about, where your weaknesses are for this job. The employer is not going to see this. This is just for you. So make whatever notes work for you. Highlighting and circling works for me. All right, once you have done that, for every uncircled item that has been highlighted, you can make notes of when you had those duties in a previous position. So which jobs did I have that required bookkeeping or ordering supplies, greeting new clients? And I'm going to write those together. And if possible, you have some specific projects or some examples or anecdotes relating to those items, write those down as well, or at least make a note to yourself to remind yourself of what that is. So I could talk about when I worked at a hospital. I worked in a pediatric specialist office, and part of my job was greeting parents and their children and putting a happy face, friendly person at the door, because these kids are pretty sick and they're coming in. It's a very stressful experience for everyone. So part of that for me was to greet them, get them checked in easily, have everything prepared before they come with their insurance. There's no surprises, and just make things as calm and simple as possible. So that's the kind of example or anecdote that I would write down for that. Other jobs might be easier to do this with. Front desk is fairly straightforward, but you can say I did X, Y, and Z at jobs 1 and 2, or I did A, B at job 3. Just write down some specifics for yourself so that you can pull from that information later. We're still just gathering our resources, putting everything together so that we can build our cover letter. This is an example I actually use in my resume class, but I like to refer to things as building blocks. I literally have my building blocks here. So for your resume, you have a lot of different pieces that you can put in a few different orders depending on what works for you. For your cover letter, it's going to be pretty straightforward. You're going to have, a start, a middle, and end, and I'm going to go through each of those steps individually. So we're pretty much going to walk you through every part of a cover letter so you can write your own. But right now, we're gathering our blocks, our different pieces, and we're going to put them together, and that will be your finished cover letter. So this is something you're going to hear me say a lot. If you did it, you can use it. That means if you have ever done this thing, it counts as experience. If you did it as a volunteer, if you did it as a hobby, or if you were working for the PTA, your local church group, if you did it just managing your own home, that is still experience. The IRS is not going to come after you if you say, yes, I answered the phone at my volunteering position or at school when I was helping out one day. They're not looking at your taxes. It does not matter if you were paid for this or not. You have the experience. You have done it. You can do it again. So don't focus primarily on, or don't focus only on the jobs you've had that were like official jobs, that you got paid for. You can use anything you've ever done. And this is especially important for people who have been out of the workforce for a while. We have a lot of parents going back to work after their children have gone to school, gotten a little bit older. Some people are coming out of retirement. You may have been incarcerated for a while, but you were still working on projects at the same time. There's so many reasons why you could have been out of the workforce and now you're coming back. And whatever you were doing during that time, you've still been learning different skills, you've been practicing, you've got your experience, you can still use it. Now, think of your cover letter as you on paper. It should be unique to you and give hints to your personality and your skills. I am very anti-templates, especially for resumes. They cause more problems than they will help you, but as well for cover letters. You don't want to just use a form letter from the internet. You want to write one from scratch because so much of this is specific to you and the job you're applying for and the experience you have. There's not any one size fits all for cover letters. And think of this as your first introduction to the employer. So they have not met you. They have not spoken to you yet. This is with your resume and maybe your application, and here's your cover letter. Your resume and your application, give them some information about you, but it's just base facts that you worked at this job from this year to this year. Here are a couple things you did. This is more of a conversation. You're introducing yourself, you're making a pitch for why they should consider you, and this is what they're going to look at to decide, do we give this person a call? Do we move on to a phone interview, or do we bring them in for an in-person interview? So you want to put some of yourself into this letter because it's you on paper. You don't want it to read the same as everyone else's. You don't want it to be very, a form that you filled in so that it's very obvious that you did not put a lot of work into this, or it's going to make you look like a very bland person, and that's not really who they want to work with every day. I do encourage writing more than one letter, unless it's one job that you're applying for that came up, maybe it's a promotion, or it's just you're only applying for a job because the perfect job came along. But for most people, you're job hunting because you need a job. You are unemployed, you're underemployed, or you're unhappy where you are. So you're going to be applying to more than one position in about 90% of the cases. So each of those positions is going to need something a little bit different, even if it's the same type of duties, just at a different company. And I'm going to talk about that more. But you can have one cover letter, and then you can tweak it a little bit for each job, and just make sure to save them in a way that you know which cover letter goes with which position. So I recommend putting the company's name in the title, or maybe you have one for similar kinds of jobs. You could put the job title in there. So using the example of the front desk, I could have one for, I was a customer service coordinator, which meant that I worked the front desk, but I also pulled products. I could have one for that kind of job. I could have a general reception or a personal assistant one, and then I could have a medical receptionist one, because that's a little bit different than a receptionist anywhere else. So I could have different versions, and I do suggest making a different one for each job, but you do not need to start from scratch for each one. Once you get your main cover letter, you're just going to change a few things here and there to tailor it to the job you're applying for. So let's take a look at what that's going to be. So if we're looking at our building blocks, the order we're going to put things in, the first part of the letter is the header. I suggest having the same header across all of your job hunting documents. So that's your resume, your cover letter, your references. Your references should be a separate document. They should not be on your resume. The people who are referring you will probably not be very happy if you put their personal contact information up on monster.com. They should just be separate as well. They're probably going to be an application, or they may be asked for them later. You might also have to put together some kind of example of your work, a portfolio. So I suggest having the same thing across all of them, so that your contact information and your name is on every document, and it's very clear which things go together. That if a hiring manager has a few different people they're considering, you want them to be able to see very clearly, this person, I have their name at the top, I have their contact information, I can get a hold of them, or this cover letter goes with this resume. Just make it simple. You want them to be able, you should not have to look for your contact information. Make it as easy to contact you as possible, because that's the next step we want to reach. Your header is going to include your name. This should be the largest thing on the page, regardless of which document. So your resume, your cover letter should be right there. They should be able to find it easily. You want it to be large and easy to read. Don't use a script font for this. Some people like to make it look like a signature. It just makes it more difficult to read. So make it nice and simple. You're going to have your address, your phone number, and your email address. An option is you can include a short one-line overview of your experience. So kind of a quick summary. For resumes, they used to have something called an objective on there. Another reason why I'm anti-template, if you see objective on any template, do not use that template for your resume. It is out of date. It's not worth it. But an objective, essentially like, why are you applying for this job? It's kind of pointless, because you're applying for a job because you need a job. That's kind of all there is to it. So instead of that, we've switched to having these summaries. And that can mean a lot of different things on your resume, but your cover letter, we just want it to be one line if you use it at all. Most people are not going to have this unless you have a significant amount of experience in a specific field. So this is more for higher level positions, but anybody can use it. So let me show you an example of what this looks like. So I've got my name at the top. And for me, and I suggest doing this for everyone, I have all the information on one line, because with most job documents, your biggest constraint is going to be space. You can only have so much information, and we don't want to lose our vertical space because of that. So instead of using, 4 different lines here for your address and your email and your phone number, you can just put them all on one line, as long as there's something in between to make it clear that one thing has ended and the next one is beginning. So I've got address, email, phone number. They don't have to be in this order, whatever order you want. I personally put my email before my phone number because that's how I prefer to be contacted, but I make it easy to have all of it on there. Now, there are some cases where you may not want to include your address. If you are applying for something out of state, it might be better to take your address off and only include it in the application. And instead, you can write willing to relocate, or you put your address and then say willing to relocate. The reason you do this is, unfortunately, some people have abused the system and made it difficult for the rest of us. That sometimes for unemployment, you have to apply for a specific number of jobs per week in order to get your benefits. And some people will just apply for anything. And some of those might be a position outside of their area. And we want it to be very clear from the start that we are applying for this job for a specific reason, that we want this job, we're actually interested. And yes, we live in Chicago, but we're willing to move to North Carolina for the right job. And you don't want them to question, did this person find this job accidentally? Did they read the information correctly? Do they know they're applying for something in North Carolina? So you might want to leave it off. For the most part, I would say include it. Under that, we have your address and salutations. This is not your address, this is the company's address. We're going to use what is called block business letter format. If you're not familiar with this, I suggest the Purdue OWL. This is their writing center at Purdue University. And at the end of this, I'm going to give you a link to a page on my website that just has a whole list of resources that will help you, and that will be included in there. So, and I'll show you throughout this examples of what this format looks like. You're going to include the date. This you might want to change before you actually send off the cover letter, because you're not going to be writing this and sending it off in the same day. Unless you're editing a previous version, it's going to take a little bit of time. So if I start writing a letter today and I send it off next week, I don't want it to have that April 6th date on it still. So I usually fill this in for when I'm starting so that I don't forget to put a date in there. And then whenever it's time to send it off, I will go back and change it to that day's date. You do not need to include your address if it is already in the header. This is part of the format for block business letter, but you can just skip over it because we've already included that at the top of the page. Next is recipient's address. If there's no specific person identified as the hiring manager or who you need to send it attention to, just address it to the business. Just skip the person's name entirely. Put the company's name and their address. There are a lot of people job hunting, and this was true before the pandemic, and now it is even more true. You are up against a lot of people, so they are receiving a ton of applications, and they don't like to put the hiring manager's name on there because then people start contacting them, and you don't need 100 people contacting you when you haven't even seen their application yet. So a lot of job postings will not give you a person's name to contact, and they'll even say in the job posting, like, basically, don't call us, we'll call you. So once you've sent in your application, they don't want to hear from you unless they reach out, because otherwise that's all this person is going to be doing, is answering calls about this job posting. Under the recipient's address, we have our salutations, our greetings. If you have the person's name, here you could include, dear Mr. Such and Such. If a specific person is not identified, I suggest using hiring committee members. To whom it may concern just sounds very vague and a little bit cliche. I don't like it very much. Hiring committee members just makes it a little bit more purposeful. It's more focused, but you still don't have that name. So here's an example of what that might look like. We've still got the header at the top, name, address, email, phone number. We've got the date, and then we have the business's name and their address. And then we start with Dear Hiring Committee Members. So that is kind of part 1 and part 2. We're slowly building our cover letter from the top down. And those are the easy parts because you know your name, you ideally know your contact information, and you've been able to pull the business's information from the job posting or job description. So now we're going to start to get a little bit harder. We're going to go into our opening paragraph. Your first sentence, I have already written for you here. It's going to be, my name is, enter your name, and I am writing to apply for the position of, you put in the job title, which I saw posted on wherever you got the information from. So I'm a librarian. I look primarily on, there's a job posting for librarians. So mine might say something like, my name is Jez Layman, and I am writing to apply for the position of programming librarian, which I saw posted on the Rails job board. Very simple. You're giving them basic information from the start. You're introducing yourself. You want them to know which job you're applying for because there may be more than one open at that time. And they want to know where you saw it. This is not as important to you. It's not going to make a difference. You're not going to have an advantage because you applied because you saw it on Indeed versus Monster. But they want to know this because hiring someone is very expensive. They're spending a lot of time finding somebody, spending time interviewing them, and then background checks and the training. It's a long process and it's expensive for them. And part of that is paying to post job ads. So they want to know, where did people see this? Where are we getting the highest return on investment? So that in the future, if they need to pick somewhere, okay, well, we've been getting a lot of people who see it on Indeed, so we want to stick with Indeed. But nobody says they saw it on Career Builder, so we're going to just take Career Builder off our list next time. This is not necessarily a requirement, but it is helpful to the hiring manager. After that, we're going to give a quick 1 to 2 sentence overview of why you are a good fit for the position and why you're interested in it. And what we want to do is use specific wording from the job description or job posting. This is why we went through and highlighted things or circled or underlined, whatever you did. We want to use those specific wording because this is unfortunate. This applies more to your resume than your cover letter, but you want them to know you read it. They want to know that it's specific to their job. With your resume and sometimes your cover letter, they go through what is called an automated tracking system. This is why you have to type in everything from your resume after you've uploaded your resume, because they're going to 2 different sources. Your actual resume, the document you've uploaded, is not going to be used unless you make it through the ATS, the automated tracking system. What it's going to do when you type in all that information is the computer is going to scan them and say, did you hit a certain number of keywords? And those keywords are what the employer has typed in. It could be the exact same job, but they're using a slightly different title. It's the same skill, but they're calling it something different. So you want to be able to use the same wording they use to get through that application tracking system so that you get to an actual person, so that somebody looks at your application and looks at your cover letter and reads it. That is the most important thing. You need to get over that hurdle before you get anywhere else. Otherwise, they're never going to see it. So we want to use the specific wording. And this is why you might have different versions of your cover letter based on the jobs you're applying to, because it could be the same position, but the companies use slightly different terms. So you're just going to go in and change out those terms. So here is an example. We're going to keep building our example here. So, dear hiring committee members, I am writing to apply for the position of front desk receptionist. I am an excellent candidate for the position based on my experience in this skill, and that other thing that you mentioned. Just fill those in. Now, I did not mention here where I saw the position. That's okay to leave out sometimes. Like, it's not a requirement, but if you need to fill space, it's a good way to do that. So I'm going to be including examples from job hunters that I have helped get positions. I've gotten permission from them to use these. So these are kind of real world examples. I've blacked out anything that is identifying information to protect their identity as well as the company they're applying for. But here's an example of some that I like. So Mr. Carlson, this time they had a specific person's name. I am writing to express my interest in the blank position recently posted on the company website. I am expected to graduate with my master's degree from University of Illinois in December of this year, but hope that my experience and drive can convince you to consider me today. This one I like because even though they did not have the required degree, they were very close to this. I think this letter was written in the summer, maybe the fall. So they were only a few months away from graduation. And sometimes a job hunt takes a long time, even for the same companies. Sometimes it just goes slowly. So she's going to be a lot closer to graduation by that time. So she's mentioning right off the bat, yes, I know that you've seen that I don't have this degree, but I think you should consider me anyway, and kind of opening that door to a conversation. Now, the bulk of your cover letter is the body. So this should not be a duplication of your resume, but an extension of it. Your resume is where you have the facts. I worked at this company in this job for these years. Here are a couple things I did. This is your chance to give them context for your skills and kind of make your pitch, your elevator speech, make your case, whatever you want to call it. It's not really good enough to say that you're a good fit for the job. You need to explain why, because everybody applying probably has the same skills that you do. You need to tell them why you do them better, or how you use them, or why you're a good a good fit for this, for the culture, if your goals are aligned. There's a lot of different things we can say here, but your resume is just straight facts. Your cover letter is kind of an explanation of those facts. We want to focus on what you can do for the company. You want to tell them why you are a good fit for their job, not why the job is good for you. I wish we were in a situation where everyone was just given the perfect job because it was a good job for them. The company has a need, and you are someone who could fulfill that need. And you need to let them know that, because they are focused on what they need. They might want to give you a job, but if you're not the best fit for them, they can't just create a job for you. I wish everyone could have the best job, but unfortunately, there is some kind of competition here. So really focus on what they need and what they want. And you want to just use that wording a little bit differently. It tells a different story by saying, I am perfect for this job, not this job is perfect for me. We do want to sell ourselves. We're promoting ourselves, but you don't want to get too cocky. I see a lot of cover letters that just rub me the wrong way because the person is writing as if they are their only possible option and we've already chosen them, because how could we possibly choose someone else? and I'll go into some examples here, but don't get too cocky. You're still asking them to consider you. You're not just telling them, I'm your only possible choice. Again, we want to use specific language from the job posting. You can also mention things in the job posting so that they know that you've read through this, you actually know what you're applying for, you spent some time thinking about this. Whenever possible, you're going to be specific and give examples. Anecdotes are fantastic for this and in your interviews. You don't want to just give them the facts. Again, we're trying to give them context. If you have specific numbers for measurable outcomes, use those because that really helps show that you can back up what you've said. If you have testimonials, use those. Maybe someone wrote a letter of recommendation for you. Maybe you get testimonials from clients or people give you feedback forms on something. If you have those quotes, use them. It's kind of like a reference without them having to call somebody. And ideally, you have done this earlier in the process, but we want to do some research on the company. What is their mission statement? Do they have a vision or a culture statement? How will you work to support these things? Because they may not be in the job posting, but they're still going to be very important in the job hunting process. This is how we decide if you are a cultural fit. That's a very vague thing. It's kind of frustrating to hear in a job hunt, but we want to know, will you fit well in this specific company? You may do a great job with this position, but is this the right place for you? Are you the right person for us to hire, essentially? So I think this is important to look at ahead of time. It should be something you do from the beginning, but it is most important for your cover letter. And then when you get around to the interview stage, you already have that research done. So here are a couple of examples. My background in communications has taught me the importance of open communication and how to be a team player. After reading your cultural statements, I believe I would be an excellent addition to your department. You're just kind of mentioning, hey, I read your cultural statements. I have done my research. I know what I'm applying for, and I'm not just sending out applications everywhere. I am constantly looking to learn, and your value statement about learning on the job and sharing knowledge with colleagues really resonates with me. This is an actual company's vision statement, but I will not tell you where. Embracing culture, connecting community, igniting curiosity. I was thrilled to read the vision statement as it reflects my beliefs about the relationship between libraries and their communities. To see a library concretely center its patrons and community in the vision really inspired me to apply. So this person is giving context for why they're applying for this job. And it also makes the employer feel pretty good that you're applying for that job because you like their company and what they do. In this case, the library. It's not just, I'm applying for a job because I need a job, which we all do, but it's, I want to work for you specifically. It kind of makes them feel good that like you're complimenting them. You want to address any required skills or experience from the job posting that you do not have. These are the things that we circled earlier. You highlighted them, just wrote them on a list, whatever you did. You're going to make a case for why you should still be considered, because the hiring manager might look at that and look at your resume and say, well, this looks pretty good, but they don't have this skill or this degree. And you don't want them to just set things aside. Give them a reason to get you in the door, essentially. So you can talk about how your other skills or experience may outweigh this one thing. You have similar but different skills or experience that can transfer, or you're always looking for new ways to improve yourself. You're excited to learn something new. You can't wait to be trained on something, that kind of thing. There's a few different ways you can approach this. Throughout the entire letter, especially in the body, you want to be succinct and get to the point. Don't ramble. Don't give extra long anecdotes or examples. They don't need the entire backstory. Just kind of get to the point. This is just an introduction. We're very limited on space. You can give more information when they call you or when you go in for an interview. Each step of the job process kind of builds on the previous one, and you give them a little bit more information each time. Your resume gives a little bit, cover letter, and then we get into the interviews and they get a wider view. We want to give them just enough information that they are interested and they want to talk to us. You want to focus on the job and your skills, not on your life story. You don't need to give them, your entire history. You want to give them a reason to continue the conversation. You want to stay positive, and it is okay to use bullet points. It does not have to be written in paragraphs. That, it's a letter and we're using block format, but if you can list a couple of things quickly in bullet points and make it work, go for it. That saves space and you're able to say a lot more in a shorter amount of time. And then we have our closing statements. It's just review why you're an excellent candidate. Don't just repeat your opening paragraph. I'm going to say something a little bit different, but we're going for the same effect. That, for all of the things that I just said, that's why I'm going to be a great candidate for this. Be brief, keep it short, and you want to keep the line open for future communication. Give them a reason to call you. And again, don't get cocky. This is the part where I most see it. So a good example might be, I would love to discuss my ideas for your company further, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bad one, and I see these all the time. It's not necessarily going to get your application thrown out. It just bothers me specifically, and I know it bothers a lot of job hiring managers. So an example for that might be, let me know when you want to set up an interview. Like, it's already a foregone conclusion, you're gonna call me, so just let me know when it works for you. Or I'll be waiting for your call. It just feels very presumptuous to me. I like to put it in the employer's hands, recognize that they have the power in this situation, and you are asking them for something. You're not telling them what to do. This is still your introduction to that. They're going to get a slight idea of your personality through your letter, and you don't want to put them off from the very beginning. Thank the reader for their time and their consideration, and then close with something like, thank you, sincerely, respectfully yours. Don't just put your name. If possible, you want to also include your signature. If you have some kind of touchpad, if you have an iPad, something that you can actually sign on the screen, go ahead and put that in there. You can also write out your signature and scan it and then use that image in that space. There are a few ways to do this. It's not a requirement. It's kind of just a holdover from when we would submit them in person or in hard copy. It's not really required for a virtual document. I think it's still a nice touch though. So here's another example. I am uniquely qualified for the position based on my extensive and varied experience, and I hope to be able to bring these skills to your company to provide the best possible experience to your users. Thank you for your time and consideration. So that one just sums up real quick. I am good for this position based on my experience. I want to bring my skills to you, and I want to provide a good experience for your users. And then you thank them for their time and for their consideration, because they are kind of doing you a favor by reading your application, reading your cover letter, and giving you a chance. And then we need to go into editing. This I still consider a part. It's not a specific section, but it's incredibly important. You will need more than one draft of your cover letter. You want to ask friends, family, coworkers, anyone you know who's willing to read your cover letter, let them do it, and have them make suggestions or corrections. You don't have to do everything they suggest. Sometimes people make really dumb suggestions. Or they can say, I don't know what this thing is. I don't understand these terms. You're like, that's fine, but the person hiring for this job will know what that means. So you can kind of ignore some things, take everything with a grain of salt, but you want to get some input from other people because you know what you can do. You know your experience. You know you're a good fit for this job. You need to convince other people of that. And maybe you have all the context in your mind, but there might be a missing piece somewhere in there that you did not think to mention. You also want to print out the document, read a physical copy, and reading it out loud will also really help. You'll tend to catch a lot more mistakes. You don't want to rely entirely on your spell check or grammar check because something could be spelled correctly, but it's not the word that you meant to use. Or it just might sound awkward, or you forget to mention something. There's kind of a weird transition. Just look over your cover letter a few times. Do the due diligence of editing. It will make a difference. I know people who have thrown out cover letters because they've found mistakes in them. And usually that's just a sign of a very competitive position or maybe a very picky boss. But if it comes down to two applicants that are essentially have the same skills and experience, they might make a decision based on something really small and petty like that. So you want to give them as few reasons to do that as possible. Now, general tips, we're looking for about 1 to 1.5 pages long. We want 1-inch margins all the way around. And just like with your cover letter, don't mess with your margins because the hiring manager will be able to tell. Sometimes people like to make them a little bit smaller so they can fit more on the page. But when they have a couple different cover letters in front of them, it's going to be really clear who essentially cheated to get more on there and who didn't. Because you're going to have a 1/2 inch margin when everyone else has 1 inch. And you should be able to be succinct and to the point to be able to use it in the space you have. We want to use a 12-point font. 11 is also good, depending on the font. We're looking for something sans serif, so without the feet, with the exception of Times New Roman. Times New Roman is kind of included because for a long time it was the default font on a lot of computers. Ideally, you will use something like Arial or Calibri, something without those little feet on the letters, because it's clearer and it's easier to read. And especially for people who might be like dyslexic or something like that, they are much easier to read. I think it also just looks nicer. Do not include a photo of yourself, please. Don't mention anything about your age, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, or your marital status. If you include those, they cannot consider you as an applicant. You are opening them up to a lawsuit because it's illegal for them to discriminate based on these things. So even if you're a great candidate, they're not going to even open themselves up to that kind of lawsuit. Don't put a picture in there. Don't tell them your race or your religion, your marital status. Most of those things are not going to apply to the job anyway. Your age may come out just based on the year that you earned a certain degree, or the years that you've been working. If you've been working for 25 years, chances are you're not fresh out of college, you're not 25. But you haven't specifically said anything. You can't claim ageism, and you just want to protect yourself by protecting the company. Don't give them a reason to throw you out before they've even considered it. And then finally, you want to save and send the document as a PDF, because even if you're using the same document, the same program, it could change a little bit from computer to computer. You want your formatting to stay the way that you've put it so that you don't end up with one word on a second page and that's the only thing on that page. Or, things just look weird sometimes. Computers do strange things. we want to be able to know with absolute certainty that what we are seeing is what the hiring manager is seeing. So just save it as a PDF. It'll lock everything in just the way that you want it, and you'll be able to send that off knowing there are not going to be any issues opening that document. So here is a link on my website. It's a page for the cover letters. It has all of the slides to this presentation, as well as links for helping you in your job hunt, helping you write cover letters, kind of a list of resources that you can use. You can't get to this from the main menu. It is for people who have taken the class, but feel free to go there. You can, I know a lot of people will use these slides and kind of go step by step while they're writing things. You are more than welcome to do that. I want to give you as many tools as possible to make your job hunt successful. All right, so let's take a look at these questions here. I've got one in the Q&A already. Given that many companies use automated resume systems to parse job applications, how important is the cover letter? Do these systems take them into account? The cover letter is most likely not going to be in the application tracking system, but you have to get through that. And once you've done that, they know, okay, this person has enough of the keywords that we want. They have the skills we're looking for. The cover letter is your chance to give some kind of context to it, to make a case for yourself and say that, yes, you have 10 people in front of you that have all the same skills. Here's why you should consider me. It's their first introduction. And this is probably the first thing that the hiring manager is going to actually read. They have your resume, they have these things, but they have not met you, and they want to be able to get some more information from each person before they start making phone calls and interviews, because those take a long time. And again, the amount of time spent by the managers is essentially money lost to the company. And also they have other things to do. They still do their regular job on top of this. So you want to make it kind of simple. Here's your elevator pitch. They are going to read your cover letter. And sometimes, if you have a really, really fantastic resume, or somebody in the company and they've recommended you, sometimes a cover letter is just we want to make sure they followed the rules and sent us all the things we asked for. But for the most part, I think the cover letter is more important than the resume. The resume is just enough to get you to a real person. Let's see what else we've got here. Okay, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A or the chat. Got them both open here. I'm happy to answer anything. As other things about the job hunting process as well, I do find that all of these pieces connect to each other. You can't take them entirely separate. So I'll give you all a moment to do that. Yes, I do teach interviewing skills. I have 2 classes, one on phone and video interviews, and then I have one on in-person interviews. If you go to my website, just the jezlayman.com, it's the same link that I provided there. I do have a list of all of the classes that I'm teaching coming up. And because everything's virtual right now, you can very easily attend any libraries programs, community centers too. I'm teaching something for the botanical gardens coming up. They have a veterans hiring program that I did not know about, so I'm kind of excited to do that one. But yes, you can take a look at any of those and come to any of my classes. How long does a hiring manager typically spend looking at your cover letter and resume? Not long enough. They will probably skim your letter. The average is somewhere around 30 seconds. That's why I think it's important to have a good opening paragraph, just a good introduction, so that they want to keep reading. And that's why I don't like form letters or templates, because they look the same as everyone else. You want to have a little bit of your personality in there, something specific to you. Give them a reason to read more than 30 seconds. You want them to read everything you've given them. It can take a really long time to put together a cover letter for just one application. Do you have any shortcuts or tips and tricks? Yes. This is when you write multiple versions of the same cover letter. It will take you a long time to write the first one. But once you have that written, you can just tweak it a little bit for each other job posting application that you're sending. So you'll just change out the date, the company's name and address. Definitely want to make sure you change that. And then change the position. Maybe mention something different about their mission statement. See if they use the same terms for the same skills. Sometimes you might be applying for something that I've applied for some positions in the last year or so at other libraries, and I've been able to talk about, hey, I've done programs at your library, or there's a company that has reached out to me, and if I'm talking to them, it's I really enjoyed working with your company because I've done training sessions for your staff in the past, or I've helped contribute to this article. There are different things you can mention, but for the most part, once you have your main cover letter, you can just go in and change out little things. And if it helps, you can highlight some of those things in your document and use it as a template, as your own personal template. That kind of template I'm in favor of. So you remember to switch out the company's name, the date, the job title, and then mention a couple of the key things they need. If you are applying for a certain kind of position, it's likely going to be very similar at different companies, unless you are looking for something really high up or something incredibly specific. So I do find that keeping old cover letters can be really helpful. There are also just a lot of resources online, and check with your local library. They have lots of resources as well.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Jez, so much. That was great. And those are great questions from everybody. Like I mentioned in our introduction, we were recording. So stay tuned and look out for the link to that in our email, or in an email to you and on our YouTube. And we'll have that listed and posted for the next 2 weeks. And be sure to visit Jez's website to take a look at the resources for this program, as well as other upcoming events that she has scheduled around the internet. So thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.